a lot of people are going to be surprised that the Chicago Bears are going to be very competitive this season. A lot of people talking about tanking. We're going to have a top 5 pick. I'm here to tell you right now, the Bears are not going to have a top 5 pick next season. It's just not going to happen. This team is going to be very competitive, and it's going to be a surprise to a lot of you. And I see you already on Twitter already talking about the top 5 pick. Don't worry about that. Unless we're trading up, we're not going to have a top 5 pick. I think that this team has everything there to be competitive. And I think, the blueprint was laid out for us by the Philadelphia Eagles. And this is something that we talked about on the show last week with Tom Hannafin of Impact Wrestling. And by the way, Slammiversary. I told you all to watch that show. It was amazing. I'm glad you guys checked it out. But here's my thing. The Bears are going to be very competitive. And you can look at what the Eagles did last season. They brought in Jalen Hurts, of course, a second-year guy, new coach. Started off a little rough, but then they focused in on that running game and became very competitive. Played good defense. They ran the football, which is something the Bears are going to be able to do this year. And at some point, the things that are missing from the Bears, a big time, and that's it. Darnell Mooney is our wide receiver 1. How about another receiver to go with Darnell Mooney and Velus Jones and Byron Pringle? How about a little bit of an improvement on the defensive line? That's fine. But the pieces are there. I think the Bears can make a run to the playoffs like the Eagles did last year. And like the Eagles did last year, they got bounced by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But that's fine. Now they are serious contenders for the NFC. And I think if the Bears are there, they do what they need to do. They continue to develop. Next season, they go into the free agent market, see who's available. Could Debo be available? Terry McLaurin, DK Metcalf? Who knows? There's a lot of volatility. Sign one of those guys. Draft somebody in the top 15, maybe top 20, whatever, and then go out there and take care of your business. So I think by mid-season, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be scrubbing their Twitter. Not me, though, because I know what's going on. And by the way, Sammy, why don't we go ahead and start the show?
Turn up your volume. Because you're about to listen to The Sick Podcast with Adam Ray.
Trying to cut it back. Justin Fields making magic happen. There goes Fields. Touchdown.
The sickest Chicago Bears and fantasy football podcast. Sports entertainment like no other. It's gonna be sick.
Hey, welcome to the Sick Podcast. It is me, Adam Rank. And before we bring out our guest, who I am delighted to have on the show once again, we have a big announcement. We are now live on Fridays on WCKG in Chicago, the world famous WCKG. And I'll be honest with you, I could not be more proud than to be a part of this great station. And I will tell you, my family, and I still have people out there in the greater Chicagoland area, the Heglands, the Bells, the Davises, the Comptons. The Comptons are still running around. Listen, none of them are impressed with anything that I do. I could be on the NFL Network all the time. They're mildly amused. I'm going to be doing a full week of GMFB. They're okay. Whatever. Total Access. Oh, that's cool. The fantasy show. They love it. But now that I'm on the radio in Chicago, on WCKG, now they're impressed. Now I've finally made it. Now I am a big shot in the family. You know what? And it's cool. Listen, radio is one of my first loves. It's what I've always wanted to do. Always just wanted to be on the radio. That's it. Growing up, I wanted to be Jim Rome. I wanted to follow along the lines of people like that, be on some of these stations like WCKG. And now it's happening. And we could not be more thrilled about this partnership. So I thank them. Thanks everybody who is listening. You're driving around Chicago right now. You're like, I know that guy. Yeah, I'm going to be here once a week talking about some Chicago Bears, bringing you some great guests like the person that we have right now. She is a return guest for us. We had her on earlier. She was amazing. She's the regional editor for the NFL Wires network of the USA Today. But even though she took that fancy promotion, you think that she gave up on the Bears? No. She continued to be the managing editor of the Bears Wire, and she does a fantastic job. She is a loyal loyal Target shopper. I don't know. Listen, her Twitter list. It's too much Bears, but let's bring her onto the show. Listen, Alyssa Barbieri. Alyssa, thank you so much. I'm trying to get a better read of you. Following, I'm looking at your Twitter follows. It's all football. Are you all football all the time?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, since I was like 7 years old, I've just been sports has been like it. But to answer your question, yes, I am a loyal Target shopper. If that
I
helps.
saw that. That's one of the ones that stood out. I'm like, oh, finally, something a little personal. Like you look at my Twitter follows. I do random things, obviously a lot of wrestling and TV and music stuff. But you're a hardened football analyst, and I guess that's good. That's why we have you on. Thank you so much for being here. We do love having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me back, and congratulations.
Oh my gosh, thank you. Yeah, we're
amazing news.
I can't believe it, and it's insane to me that we're people driving around Chicago listening to this show. Like it's awesome. I mean, keep your eyes on the road. Don't veer off. Maintain your focus. But it's awesome to be a part of that and have you on here as well. Although I am a little, I don't know. I got to be honest with you. I wanted to talk to you because I'm a little put out by something that you wrote a couple of weeks ago, and I'm gonna. I follow your work. I enjoy your work. But the other day in my inbox, because I get it mailed to me, I don't want to miss it. I sign up to the Bears Wire newsletter because I want that news dropping daily. And you wrote an article. Let me see if I get let me get the headline right. It's the headline said the Bears are hot garbage and they're not going to win because they're awful. Okay, maybe that's a little extreme. But you had a piece called the 5 positions that the Bears got worse over the offseason. And I guess my first question is, why do you hate us and why do you hate me?
Well, I mean, that's good. That's the content that people want to see. So, I mean, I had to analyze the good and the bad because, I mean, let's be real. I mean, a lot of the attention this offseason has been quite negative. And I mean, there's a good reason for it, but there's also like, you mentioned some optimism, but it's hard to kind of look at this roster and what Ryan Poles has done so far. I mean, he has to tear it down. That's just the simple fact of the matter. And when you do that, you're going to be worse at some positions. So, I mean, that's not going to be permanent, obviously. It's going to take some time through the draft and free agency next season when right now I think they have like $97 million in cap space heading into 2023, but a lot of roster spots to fill as well. So, I mean, but there are some weaknesses on this roster. We'll see what happens, during training camp when you have players being cut and any pickups that are made. So, but I mean, there are some weaknesses on this team heading into 2022. Don't necessarily think that means that they're going to be a bottom 5 team in the slightest.
That's my takeaway is that you don't like us. No, I'm just kidding. That's the overreaction to people. And I know that you have, people write headlines and they want to read, and people love lists and they love top 5s and they love listen, I get the CEO or the SEO that you want to get, and it's understandable. But I do have it here in front of me. I want to go over it. We'll go over the 5 positions because I do want to dive into this a little bit because I don't necessarily disagree. I think that because number 1, you had wide receiver. And I think that it's a fair statement because, Allen Robinson is gone. And Allen Robinson, to me, is one of the better players in the NFL. But at the same time, couldn't you say that last year, the way Allen Robinson was used, and I put this mostly on the coaching staff and the management for franchise tagging him, aren't we kind of better off? Like, isn't the breakup aren't both sides better off that relationship has ended?
I mean, if Ryan Pace was still here, I think so, because I think that relationship and Allen Robinson feeling disrespected because he wasn't being paid like some of the top receivers in the league. And obviously that even impacted the contract he signed with the Rams. So, I mean, I think a lot of people were hoping that maybe Ryan Poles would come in here and want to rebuild that. But at the same time, he was kind of strapped with, the salary cap situation and having to clear all of these, big salaries and get rid of some of these older players. He clearly wants a younger roster, and he's doing it his way. We can't fault him for that. But I mean, it's hard to kind of think that this team would not be a lot better, or that there would be so much criticism surrounding the Bears or Justin Fields supporting cast if Allen Robinson was still in the building.
Yeah, that's fair. Because we would probably be having prime Allen Robinson, Justin Fields able to practice with him, which I guess would have been a shock. Yeah, I know it's weird. I know it's a weird thing this season to think about that, like practicing with the ones. What is this all about? I will though. I wonder though. I don't know how much you follow me on the social medias, but Velus Jones and I are now best friends, and I've really, I've taken it. It has become my mission, I guess I should say, to try to get him over and to try to let the world know that this young man's going to come out and be a very productive football player from week one. What is your read on Velus Jones? How do you think that he's going to be able to do this season with the Bears?
I mean, immediately during offseason workouts, they were kind of putting him at every position because they really want him. They really want to utilize him. I mean, he's someone that could be a true playmaker for Justin Fields. His speed is just incredible. And then obviously his run after the catch ability. I think that they can use him however they want. He's someone Justin Fields described in an interview with Bleacher Report as a running back that's playing receiver. So, I mean, I think that the sky's endless. The limit is endless. But I guess we'll see kind of more. I guess we won't really know until we see him out there on the field. But I think that he's going to be a big part of this offense. And Luke Getsy's probably like, oh yeah, I can work with this.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things too. And I know that the Bears wrapped up mandatory mini camps recently, and there's still a long ways to go. And I think that having a player who's a little bit more established, and obviously a lot of people made light of his age and why are we drafting somebody who's old enough to rent a car and things of that nature. I think that actually benefits somebody like Justin Fields. Like, he is the exact same age as AJ Brown. And, I don't think that Philadelphia fans are looking at AJ Brown being like, why do we have this old wide receiver? They just see somebody who can play. Do you think that too much is being made of his age?
Yeah, and that was the first negative criticism that everyone seemed to have when the Bears drafted him. I know people were a little surprised that he was taken as high as he was. And one of the things was, well, he's 25 years old. He's going to be 25 when the season starts. But then you have that maturity too, which you can argue some receivers in the past, like Anthony Miller, maybe didn't have. And so I think that that's beneficial. And he even mentioned that it could be definitely beneficial. He has more experience and, he's coming in as a rookie, but he's also a veteran in a way because he's had that additional experience.
Yeah, one of the things that the second criticism I think that we would have found was a couple of weeks ago. It might have been a month now, maybe not that long, but a couple of weeks ago, somebody from one of the Chicago papers, and I mentioned this on the show before, came out and called him undersized. Said he was, and of all the things that you're going to criticize this young man about, like, I did not get the impression, and I even said it. I said, listen, I've been up close to him. I've been face to face with him. Undersized is not a way that I would have described him. The dude ended up blocking me and then eventually ending his Twitter account. Do you think that he's undersized? I don't know. I don't get the undersized comment.
Yeah, I don't get that either. I mean, you could say that about plenty of receivers that, have obviously overcome that. And that's going to be the thing. Like, we'll see what can Velus Jones do. Like, I mean, like, he hasn't even hit the football field yet. I mean, we've been practicing right now. We're talking about practice. So, I mean, I think these criticisms might be more valid later down the line once the regular season gets going. But I mean, obviously his strength is going to be that speed and exactly how he's going to be utilized and what he can really do with that.
No, absolutely. The speed is the one thing that stands out to me. That's one of the things that you can't teach. And you know what? When you come in, and even if, he has a limited playbook, there are opportunities for him to go out there and make pop plays, to make YouTube plays and things like that. And speaking of YouTube, for anybody listening to us on WCKG, the Sick Podcast is available on YouTube. You can search us out. Go out there, just type in the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank. Not only do we have this show, but we do a Tuesday night show that you probably have seen featured on the WCKG Facebook page. Check us out. We also will, once the season starts, likely have some game recaps as well. So plenty of content in addition to the show that you're listening to right now. And we are being joined right now by Alyssa Barbieri of the USA Today, talking about the Bears, talking about 5 ways the Bears roster not quite as great as it was last year in the wide receiver position. I understand that's a fair position. Your second one was the interior defensive line. And again, when I look at it, and I think like Akeem Hicks is gone, and there's been some other losses. This one's a little bit hard to defend because Ogunjobi did not pass his physical, and we ended up losing out on him. A lot of it seems, comes down to Justin Jones. Is this one? Could the Bears be in trouble on the interior here?
Yeah, and I think that's probably the biggest concern on this defense heading into the season. When you kind of look at the losses, Akeem Hicks, Bilal Nichols, and Eddie Goldman, even though Goldman was coming off a pretty rough year, I mean, you could still argue those are they've been starters down the line. The defensive line for many years has been the biggest strength of this defense, and now it's just kind of like a reset. I mean, you have obviously Justin Jones at the 3 tech. He's going to be one of the most important positions. And now you might have Kairos Tonga at the nose tackle, who is a second-year player, had some reps last season, but again, an unproven player. And Matt Eberflus talked about kind of implementing this rotational system with, along the defensive line, even on the edge. And so guys like Mario Edwards and Angela Blackson, I think you're going to see a lot of them as well. So at least they have the depth, but at the same time, you don't have those big playmakers. I mean, I could be wrong. Let's see what Justin Jones does. Prove us wrong, right? Or Kairos Tonga, or whoever's starting there alongside him. So I definitely think that's my biggest concern on defense. When I really thought it might be linebacker. But at this point, I thought they would address it. I mean, Ryan Poles did try to with Ogunjobi, but as we saw, it didn't work out. And Jones is plan B, so we'll see if plan B works.
Yeah, and they moved really quickly onto Justin Jones. There was it wasn't like it went weeks where they were looking for a replacement for him. They were pretty immediate going to Justin Jones. And I think a big reason why was that he was highly sought after. I know that I think it was Minnesota who was looking at him to come in to play the position as well. He obviously had, because the Rams, he was the assistant. Kevin O'Connell was a Rams assistant. Justin Jones, of course, played for the LA Chargers. And one of the things that always, though, that stands out to me is that Justin Jones did battle some injuries during his time in Los Angeles. But when you look at the statistics of when he was on the field, he was a highly productive player. And I think that there's a big reason why that he was highly sought after, why Ryan Poles did not wait. And also, when you look at this, and again, I know that you're writing from a roster construction standpoint, and there's truth to that the interior defensive line on paper does look worse. But could you reason that with Matt Eberflus there in control, that he has done a great job over the course of his career of working with defensive lines that didn't have a lot of big names? I know the Colts made a big trade with the 49ers a couple of years ago, but he's done throughout his career, he's been able to do it with some non-big names. Is there a chance, though, that despite the fact that these guys are not household names, that they could be a little bit better?
I don't know. We'll see if they're better. But I mean, Matt Eberflus, I think, is the X factor. Like you mentioned, I think coaching, I think this is it's going to have a big impact on this season because Eberflus, he's the defensive guy, right? This is when you get that defensive-minded head coach, and he has a proven success with defense. We saw what he did in Indianapolis. So, and kind of looking at the fact that Ryan Poles hasn't gone out and made any other moves, kind of maybe tells you that Matt Eberflus is feeling confident with the personnel that he currently has, and that he can get the most out of them. And we're going to see a lot. They're going to be playing a lot of rotation in there. So, I mean, can they be better? That would be amazing, right? When you're talking about replacing Hicks and Goldman. So I hope so. But I think Eberflus is going to do a number with this and with this defensive line. And it kind of makes you wish that, the Bears had him last year, right? When they had those other names in place. But I mean, we'll see. It kind of seems like he's confident with the personnel he has right now. So if there's I think that's the one thing that has me feeling like not panicking at the moment, because they have someone like Eberflus who kind of knows how to get the job done.
Yeah, it's kind of like, when you're on an airplane and you hit some turbulence and you want to start, you get a little, or at least I do. I get a little nervous. I start looking around. I always look at the flight attendants. The flight attendants are walking around nonchalant. They're still delivering coffee. They're doing whatever. Then I don't panic. I go, okay, we're fine. But then, when they're taking their seats, they're putting on their seat belts. That's when I get a little concerned. And to me, like you said, there doesn't seem to be a lot of panic. They're still out there. Ryan Poles is still out there delivering peanuts, making sure you don't have an allergy or whatever. But yeah, he's still out there. Yeah, that's cool. Little bumpy air. It's no big deal. So again, and I know a lot of this too, and this comes from the eternal optimist. And for anybody who is listening to us for the first time on WCKG, I'm the optimist guy. I'm always going to take the brighter side of things and be like, no, we're better. We're okay. And I go back to the coaching, and I think that it's going to be better. And by the way, as you say, where was he last year? Could you imagine if we would have had Eberflus last year? Oh my gosh, they should have cleaned house last year, but then we might not have Justin Fields. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of take what we have because we got Justin Fields, and as someone who's been following the Bears for her entire life and has like never had a franchise quarterback except for Jay Cutler, maybe. I'm good with that. So we'll see now. He has a chance to kind of to build this defense from the bottom up, and any hopeful franchise quarterback.
Let's talk about quarterback then, because this will lead us into the next position of weakness that we had. But speaking of that, before we move on to your number 3 point or your number 3 position, franchise quarterbacks. You talk about Jay Cutler. Legitimately, like, I know this is a joke, but like, who are the guys? Like, what do we do? Like that, I always say that the 3 best Bears quarterbacks in my lifetime have been Jim McMahon, Jay Cutler, and then it's Walter Payton on the halfback option. And that's the list. That's the list right there. And you said Jay Cutler. You're younger than me. Like, you've never really seen excellent quarterback play. That's sad to me.
Yeah, Jay Cutler is the only one. That's it. Just one. He's the one. And that's the frustrating thing, right? I think for Bears fans, and that's why, having Justin Fields on the roster, I think, even for a season where you kind of know that they're probably not going to have a great season, but we kind of hold out hope. I mean, it's June now, right? They still have optimism, but at the same time, it's as long as Justin Fields kind of takes that step forward and shows that, hey, maybe he's finally going to be the guy that so many people like me have been waiting for most of their lives, then it'll all be worth it, right?
Yeah, and it's one thing too, because we had Jim McMahon on the show a couple of weeks ago. And by the way, again, if you're tuning in for the first time on WCKG, you want to go back into our YouTube archives, you can find the podcast that we did with Jim McMahon, a great conversation there. One of the things that he talked about, which is kind of funny, not funny, but Jim McMahon was such a prolific passer. Like, if you knew anything about him at BYU or anything like that, and then when he gets to the Bears, it is all like you're just handing off the football. Like, your job is to hand off the football to Walter Payton. Had he gone to some other organization, he might be looked at as, this all-time great quarterback. Because even Steve Young was like, Jim McMahon was better than me. That it's so funny about the circumstance. So we finally did get a franchise quarterback. We used him as a guy to hand off the ball to Walter Payton. And I know a lot of the old people will come in and be like, well, Sid Luckman, like, listen, Sid Luckman, like, even though nobody remembers, stop it with Sid Luckman. I don't want to, I always, that's why I always couch it with my lifetime. Like, and it seems impossible, like, not to be able to go and have, like, how do we not have at least one good quarterback? You look at an organization, and I know that they were just in the Super Bowl, but I still look down on them. The Cincinnati Bengals. The Cincinnati Bengals have gone on a run where they had, like, Ken Anderson, who's like a borderline Hall of Famer, Boomer Esiason, to Carson Wentz, to Andy Dalton, wasn't even that bad, to Joe Burrow now. And speaking of Andy Dalton, that brings us to number 3 on your list. You think the Bears are now worse at backup quarterback, even though we brought in our own blood. We brought in a nice Northwestern kid, a guy, Clay Harbor. Again, if you want to go back to the archives, Clay Harbor was on the show. We talked about how great Trevor Siemian is, and you besmirched him. You defamed the pride of Chicago. Why, Alyssa? Why did you do this to us?
Well, when you look at it, I mean, Andy Dalton and Nick Foles, obviously as starters, did not work out. But I mean, at the same time, kind of wondering what they would look like without Matt Nagy. I think we're all wondering that. But at the same time, like, they're 2 veterans that have a lot of experience, and I think they're very helpful to Justin in the quarterback room as well. So when you go from them to Trevor Siemian and Nathan Peterman, not definitely a downgrade, just kind of in terms of overall success in terms of their careers and kind of what they bring to the table, especially because when you think about it, like last year, as we saw, Fields was just like, obviously he got hurt last year because he was just being banged behind the line. So, I mean, at any moment you could have that backup coming in, and, it's kind of like, who do you feel more comfortable coming out there? You feel like Andy Dalton or Nick Foles or Trevor Siemian or Nathan Peterman. It's just a sad reality that we have to live with in the NFL, because they can happen very quickly.
I'll sit here and allow you to take your shots at Trevor Siemian, but Nathan Peterman, I will not stand for. This young man has had to wear it so often, been put in such unenviable situations, and yet somehow he still gets jobs. Like, that is the one thing, like, that is the most insane thing to me, is like, he's still, like, this guy's still a backup quarterback. It's like when they talk about Carson Wentz. who's the Commanders quarterback, and he's out there in his press conference wearing his Nick Papa Giorgio gold jacket, looking all talking. The guy never talks like a starting NFL quarterback. And they're like, this is my last chance. And it's like, no, Carson, you'll get like 8 more chances. Like, what are you talking about? Last chance. You're going to be in the NFL for a long time. As long as you want to be a backup quarterback or whatever, you are going to have your chances. And then, I don't know. So I don't know what my point was. But Nate Peterman, I'm upset about that. I will say this. I'm going to miss Nick Foles being an extension of the fans on the sideline talking to Matt Nagy. Because there were times last year where you're like, Nick Foles gets me. Like, the way he was so dismissive of the coach, I thought, like, if you're looking for the highlights, that might have been my biggest highlight from last year.
Yeah, I mean, that's the one thing, because Nick Foles, obviously the whole 2020 quarterback situation, even like dating back to training camp, the whole Trubisky versus Foles, and the fact that nobody could win it, and we're just like, okay, this is gonna end well, right? And then just kind of like seeing the fact that the Bears shelled out a draft capital and paid Nick Foles a crap ton of money, and to see how that kind of went, that didn't sit well with a lot of fans, but at the same time, he made up for it with how he was kind of sticking it to Matt Nagy back in 2020 and last year in 2021. So I got to give it up for Foles, because, he was, like you said, an extension of the fans on the sideline and was pretty much saying things that we all wanted to say to him, right? But couldn't. So good on you, Nick Foles. I appreciate that.
Like, you always have like somebody in your line of work, wherever you work, there's always somebody who has the ear of the boss, who's able to say things that you as a rank and file employee might not be able to say. That was Nick Foles. And he was great. I will say this. Now, Nick Foles is kind of my ideal backup quarterback. I don't know if they had to get rid of him because of the salary cap implications or whatever, but he always seemed to be able to just kind of accept who he was as a player. And that is one of the things that I would say for Trevor Siemian. Like, he has the ability to win games in this league. Like, if you put him into a situation where, you know what, you got the Giants upcoming, he needs to start, he can go out there and win that game. And I think that, long term, like, he's not going to be your franchise quarterback, but in the short term, he's got the ability to go out there and win some games. And I think that's important. I think sometimes when you have players like Andy Dalton that are borderline, like, yeah, you're sort of good enough to be a franchise, like, he could, like, if he was in Washington, I would almost think that he's a better option than Carson Wentz. That's just me, but I think that he could be. And I think it's difficult when you have these guys that are like, you're a backup, but you think you're a starter. You know what? To me, and it's like a situation, it's like an analogy that I always like to use. It's like, always play the tees that are commiserate to your skill level. I know it's a golf metaphor, but too often you get these guys out there, and I see it. I'll go out there. I was staying at a vacation home in Palm Springs this year, and you see people go out there hitting from the blues, sometimes hitting from the blacks. And it's like, bro, that's not where you should be. You're a front tees person, and you should accept that. The worst are the people who don't understand that. And I think Andy Dalton was kind of in that mix where it's like, bro, at this point of your career, sort of a backup. You should be that guy. And it also still offends me that they had to placate him last year. Like, oh, we promised Andy Dalton. He was this. You promised Andy Dalton. Okay. You didn't promise prime Peyton Manning. I think there needs to be a little bit of a break from there. So again, Alyssa, I kind of like Trevor Siemian. I think he's going to be good for us.
I mean, we'll see. And Ryan Poles seems to agree with you, because he was saying that Siemian has more of a similar skill set to Fields, and so he feels more comfortable doing that. Obviously, he's a lot cheaper too. When you kind of look at the combined money between Foles and Dalton last season, just ridiculous. And now you get Siemian and you get Peterman at a cheap rate. So, I mean, I think that's the theme for Poles this offseason, is kind of signing a lot of these veterans to some cheap one-year deals. So, well, in Simeon's case, 2 years. So, I mean, we'll see. Hopefully he ends up working out. Hopefully we don't see him too much.
No disrespect to Siemian, but I want him on a ball cap on the sideline for the entirety of the year. I want him out there just hanging out, just being a part of the show, congratulating Justin Fields when he makes a great play and he's running off the sideline. I will say this. I do not know Trevor Siemian. I know people who know Trevor Siemian who love him. He's athletic, as you said. And I think that he's probably that guy that I don't know. This is me imagining it. But when he was doing intramurals at Northwestern, like he was a better basketball player or whatever than you were giving him credit for. You're like, oh, Trevor Siemian can go. So I have high hopes for him. So again, this is where I disagree with you, but I think that we're probably better off. And I'm saying we. I know everybody who's listening to us on WCKG being like, who is this lunatic and why is he saying we? Is he a part of the team? Nope. But I say we. I buy all the merch. They send it to me. But listen, I buy a lot of the merch for my kids. I'm buying them Velus Jones jerseys, even though Alyssa doesn't like it. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm not kidding about buying the jersey that you didn't like. I'm just teasing. But I think, by the way, yeah, anybody who's just tuning in right now, Alyssa Barbieri of the USA Today is with us, the managing editor of the Bears Wire, and she's got a big gig at the USA. She's an important person at the USA Today, but still slums it with us covering the Bears, and we appreciate that. Even though she's sitting here taking her shots at them, we still appreciate you. Let's go to the next position where was it? Hold on. Backup court. Oh, it was edge. This is again, I understand where you're coming from. If you're looking at the grand scheme of things, Khalil Mack, Travis Gibson, I mean, it's no comparison. But again, I will point out that when Khalil Mack was out last season, Gibson played pretty well, and now he's moving back to his defensive end position, which I think could be beneficial.
Yeah, definitely, along with that added experience. But I mean, it's something that had to be said, right? Like you said, Khalil Mack to Travis Gibson, there's no comparison at all. One's an all pro bowler. So, I mean, going from Mack to Gibson, but Gibson, there's a lot to love about him. Al-Qadim Muhammad coming over from Indianapolis as well. And then Robert Quinn, at least he's there, right? He's showing up, right? He's not getting traded. Right. So, I mean, you still have Robert Quinn on one side coming off a career year, or a bare single season career year, and then having Gibson another year of experience and going back to his natural position, defensive end, and having Matt Eberflus there, right? That's just, it kind of feels like, I don't necessarily think edge rusher is going to be bad. I just think when you look at the roster, it just got worse because you lose Mack and you don't really have a replacement for him.
It is one of those situations, though, when you look at what happened. Again, I was of the mind, and I said this before the trade even went down, that I would keep Khalil Mack, I would keep Robert Quinn. I think it was going to be more beneficial to hold on to those guys, and perhaps during the middle of the season, if things aren't working out, or even if they are, if you understand you're a middling team that's not competing for a Super Bowl, that you could flip them, similar to what the Denver Broncos did last season with Von Miller, where they were able to trade him to the LA Rams. He went on to lead them to a Super Bowl. I thought that both of those guys could be those type of players. Perhaps Bobby Quinn is still that guy that they flipped during the season. But at the same time, the Khalil Mack thing was, something that when you find a team that's going to give you a second round pick and pick up his entire salary, I think that's of the benefit. I think that ended up being a good move, even though on paper it doesn't look great for the Bears defense.
Yeah, when that trade happened, everyone when the terms came out, they're like, a second and a sixth, that's it for Mac. But then, like you said, it had the added benefit of the salary cap impact, especially in 2023, where it frees up, I think, about $26.5 million additional cap. So that's a big thing, especially considering you don't know if Khalil Mack's trade value is going to be the same as it is a year ago. Is he recovered from that foot injury? Are people going to trade for him? Is he going to be the same Khalil Mack that he was? There are always those questions. So I think Poles saw it as an opportunity to kind of also capitalize on getting a draft pick out of it, right? Getting a couple draft picks, which is something he had 5 when he took over, and he then turned that into 11. So, I mean, pretty impressive for Poles. And I think it just kind of speaks to the direction, getting younger on the roster and freeing up a little bit of salary cap space even for this year to make some other moves.
Yeah, that is one of the things too. Again, like I thought that I was impressed. I was impressed with the way he was able to go out there and solidify the offensive line. I noticed that you didn't put offensive line on this list. The 5th one, though, was punter, if I'm remembering this correctly. That's where I checked out because O'Donnell's dead to me. Going to the Packers, that's the thing. Like, listen, I know you got to leave. Allen Robinson leaves. He goes to the Los Angeles Rams. I'm happy for him. Like, I hope he has a great career. I hope he has a great season. I have no ill will towards Allen Robinson. I thought the situation last season with Matt Nagy and Ryan Pace was not beneficial to him. So you had to let it go. You had to move on. That's fine. At the same time, Matt Forte's also done this. He went and he played for the Jets. That was perfect. Go play for the Jets. We never have to worry about you. You're fine. Go do your thing. The fact that you would go and sign with the Green Bay Packers, I would have instructed my agent, been like, do not accept the deal from the Packers. What is that all about? And what can you tell us about our new punter? Because I'll be honest, I haven't studied him, and I hope we never see him. I never want to be punted.
Yes. No, yeah. I'm a Pat O'Donnell, that whole situation, like you said, the Packers, really? I mean, like, I guess the money and just kind of finding another job. It might have been something where you kind of wonder if Poles was someone who maybe he wanted to move on because, like, O'Donnell kept getting signed to these 1-year extensions and kind of seemed like he was on the way out eventually. And clearly the Bears had intent with Trenton Gill when they drafted him, or they were going to draft a punter in the draft, because when Ryan Winslow was still on the roster, did not see that kind of being a replacement. I mean, like you said, I hope we don't see too much of Gill. I mean, don't know a lot about him yet. I mean, we'll see. Right now, it looks like it's his job at this point, right? Because he's the only guy on the roster, only punter on the roster. So, I mean, we'll see. Hopefully, like you said, they're not punting too much.
Well, the thing of it is, and this is probably why I didn't pay too much attention to it yet. I'll start deep diving a little bit as we get closer to training camp and everything. I really do appreciate one of the approaches that Ryan Poles had in the draft, where a lot of the guys that he selected have a strong background or history on special teams. Obviously, Velus Jones Jr., strong special teams guy. But a lot of these other players have a lot of great special teams pedigrees. And I think that is a good sign. It helps as a throwback to the Lovie Smith era, which the Matt Eberflus era is starting to show that as well this early into his tenure. I don't know why, but I just kind of trust Ryan Poles for whatever reason. Am I being foolish once again?
I mean, I'm kind of on that boat too. I mean, we're just a few months in. I think that's the right response, right? Is you have someone new coming in who's someone with a clear vision, and he's making that vision happen so far. Granted, they haven't taken the football field yet. We'll see if they're feeling the same in a couple of years. But I do like that he kind of came in, even from like the whole GM process, the hiring process, where he came in and reportedly demanded that he wants to be the one to hire the head coach, right? Not like he was going to be kind of pushed together, kind of like the Bears did with Ryan Pace and John Fox, right? No arranged marriages. He wanted to pick the guy because he knows that it's going to be them two that are answering for this entire team, and it's going to be their jobs on the line. So I really liked that kind of command, and that he has a clear vision for what he wants to do. I mean, it's only been a few months, so I mean, people that are still kind of like on him need to take a step back, because it's going to take some time, right? You're not building a Super Bowl winning roster in 1 year, especially when you're strapped to draft capital and some salary cap space. So I mean, I've liked what he's doing so far. I have a good feeling about him. Hopefully it works out. I guess the next Ryan and Matt 2.0, you're really hoping that one does pan out.
Yeah, that is one of the things that was unfortunate, that we had to go Matt and Ryan once again, because that, again, like you give the media something to focus in on that's stupid. They're just going to go in and do it. Like, that's just a given. Like, hey, it's Ryan and Matt again. Like, okay, we get that. I think it's insane though when teams hire a GM after a head coach. Like, it makes absolutely no sense. There's never, unless the GM abruptly has to resign or something happens, let the GM come in and pick a coach, because he's got to reshape the whole vision over the organization. And let me ask you this. Now, we were going over the 5 things where the Bears got worse. Let's start. This is now where I can start being positive again. I think that in this short time, and you alluded to it a moment ago, Alyssa, I really do feel that there have been a lot of positive steps already. The fact that it seems like, they're not answering to Ted. It's Ryan Poles. Like, he is going to be the guy who's going directly to the McCaskey family, as it should be. It feels like a lot of the things, like they bring in Ian Cunningham, who is an assistant GM, which we have never had before. And he's adding to the infrastructure of this team. Again, these are things that might not result in a win this season, but I think for the long term, it really feels, and I know that there's skepticism, and I know that Bears fans always want to complain about the family or whatever. I really do believe that the family has now put the organization in a great spot and is moving forward and allowing Ryan Poles to add layers to this situation.
Yeah, especially when you go from the previous regime, right? And kind of how that kind of blew up in their faces, and how they probably let it go on a little too longer than they should have, right? There was an argument they could have fired Nagy a little bit earlier. or even Ryan Pace, you kind of, saw their track record. They were it felt like they were clinging to the 2018 season, which, people forget it was like 4 years ago, right? Not like this team has not gotten better since then. So, I mean, obviously that had to be made. And I think the handling of Justin Fields, Ryan Pace does get credit for drafting him, but, and Matt Nagy does get credit for also mishandling him as well. So I think, that's a big thing. And you look at this new regime coming in and, again, we're in the very beginning. So you have that optimism, but kind of seeing that it feels night and day, completely different. Like Matt Eberflus from Matt Nagy, it just kind of feels like the adult has entered the room. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like we're just even listening to him speak, he's actually answering questions, not trying to kind of, kind of like elude certain questions and kind of like talk around something and say something without saying anything. And, Ryan Pace always kind of seemed to hide in the corner where Ryan Poles is kind of more open and he's like answering questions. It just feels like a completely different atmosphere, and it makes you kind of feel optimistic that maybe this is the turnaround that they needed.
It is almost off-putting that Ryan Poles has been very upfront. He's been very deliberate, and then he's delivered on everything that he said he was going to do. It's almost like when you're playing poker with somebody and he's like, I've got pocket tens. And you're like, okay, that's not what he has, whatever. And then he flips the cards. I'm like, that's what, like you told me your hand, because he talked about the draft. Like, I'm not doing this. I'm not signing any big money free agents. I'm not going wide receivers in the draft. Like, don't assume, like everything that he has said, he has gone out and done. And again, for Chicago Bear fans, we're like, we're not used to this. Like, what is happening? Who is this person? What is going on? Because Matt Nagy always seemed like a cool sub. Like the cool sub. Like he's like Rod Belding. Like, hey, he's the cool sub, promising all this stuff. He's going to take us white water rafting, then leaves us high and dry. Like it just feels now just so much, just so refreshing. And we have a football coach, a guy who actually likes football. He's not sitting there diagramming. Like, I don't want to sit there and look at somebody's living room and it looks like Carrie from Homeland trying to figure out, with all these, Charlie from Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Like, no, this is just a football guy who's putting football things together. I love everything about this.
God, you just said that and that reminded me of, remember the virtual draft and Matt Nagy had all of his play sheets on the walls and the wallpaper. Oh man. And yeah, it just, again, it feels like the adults are in the room. Like, I mean, that was cool. Everyone loved Matt Nagy when the Bears were winning in 2018, but then in 2019, when things started taking a turn, then he's like, uh-oh. Now you can't cling to that. Now you're actually responsible for this. You need to fix it. And it just kind of felt like he got a little too arrogant for the situation. He was like, okay, look, I can do these cool things. People loved me for it. And then he just kind of did whatever he wanted. The whole for all the collaboration talk, right? That word that kind of still has Bears fans just like, oof. For all the collaboration, it just didn't really seem that he collaborated with his players. Like Trubisky even talked about it, like in his last year, how, when he replaced Nick Foles at the end of the year, that he went in there was like, okay, this is what I want to do. This is what I do well. And that's when Bill Lazor was calling plays, and you kind of started to see the offense do a lot better. Granted, they were playing, some lesser opponents, but you kind of saw that, Trubisky was like, hey, this is what I do well. I want to do this. And it worked for them, right? And I think that with Luke Getsy coming in here and building this offense around Fields and doing what he does well and what the rest of the players do well, I mean, I think that's going to be a huge impact. A lot of people talk about Justin Fields' supporting cast not having like those big names, but at the same time, he didn't have an offensive scheme last year that did right by him. And I think that in itself is going to be like having one of those playmakers out there.
Yeah, that is one of the biggest things. And I think that's the argument that goes on, especially on social media, where everybody wants to dismiss Justin Fields after 1 year. Like, he didn't have a competent play calling head coach. He did not practice with the ones. He did not do any of the things that a normal first round pick that you traded up to draft has to go through. Even some of the guy, and you've seen it happen with other quarterbacks, like, yeah, okay, you got to go in, you got to share some time with a veteran who doesn't want you to be there, maybe somebody who doesn't want to help you. We see the situation, which is sort of unfolding in Tennessee, where Ryan Tannehill's like, it's not my job to get Malik Willis up to speed. Like, it happens. But at the same time, like, for a coach to absolutely ignore a first round draft pick, this isn't like a fourth round guy. This isn't like Dak Prescott, who was a fourth round guy who came in and only got his opportunity because Tony Romo was out. Like, you went out and you sought out Justin Fields. He was clearly better than Andy Dalton. And then you're like, that's fine. Like, we're not going to do anything with this. I don't know if they felt it was better to put him in their hip pocket and be like, well, if things go south this year, we can be like, well, we still got Justin Fields. And maybe you can fool the McCaskies into thinking that. And I'm happy that, it was exposed last year. But at the same time, like that to me seems like one of the things that people overlook the most. And speaking of overlooking, again, Alyssa Barbieri of the USA Today joining us here, talking about her 5 positions where the Bears got worse. Let's talk about some of the spots, though, where they might have gotten better. And I was surprised by this. The Pro Football Focus does not like the Bears running back room, which is a shock to me. How do you feel about the Bears running back room? Because I think that they could both be set up for a big year in 2022.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel really great about it. So I was a little surprised. I mean, Dave Montgomery is no stranger to being, underappreciated, right? I think last year they had him ranked at 25th or 26th in the league, and it was just kind of ridiculous. But I feel really good about their running back room. I mean, you had Khalil Herbert, who had a really impressive rookie season for when he was given the ball, right? He replaced Montgomery for 4 games, and I don't think he rushed for less than 70 yards in those. He really got that experience in. He was good on special teams as well. And obviously, David Montgomery entering a contract year, this is a year, well, he tries to downplay it like, oh, I'm not thinking about where I'm going to be playing next year. But in the back of his mind, he has to be thinking that. So, he's going to turn the gear up, turn it on. So, and he also missed 4 games last year, and he probably would have had back-to-back 1,000-yard rushing seasons. And then you kind of look at the offense coming in. Matt Nagy, again, he wasn't the biggest fan of running the ball, right? And with Luke Getsy's offense, it's going to be catered to helping Justin Fields, and that includes a run-heavy scheme. So we're going to see a lot of David Montgomery and Khalil Herbert. And Adam, the Bears have a fullback again.
What?
They have a fullback, which is crazy. I mean, because, that means they're going to run the ball, right? And you even saw some of the tight ends they picked up in free agency. It really indicates that the run game is going to be a big part of this offense. And for what David Montgomery has accomplished, and from the little, burst that we've seen from Herbert, I just kind of was shocked that they had them at 16th, like the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe if I put them in the top 10, but maybe right there on the outskirts.
I would have had them definitely inside the top 10. And by the way, Kari Blasingame was a guest on the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank a couple of weeks ago. And again, if you want to go down and like and subscribe to this podcast, we're on YouTube. Anywhere where you download podcasts, you can go back, check out some of those great archives. We had Jim McMahon, obviously. We had Clay Harbor, Kari Blasingame. We got some other great guests lined up for us here in the future. And again, we're so excited to be a part of the WCKG family, but just want to let everybody know who's driving around like, hey, I kind of like this show. Maybe I want to check out some more of it. We got some great stuff in the archive, so I implore you to go check that out. And I implore you to look at what Luke Getsy was able to do last year with the Green Bay Packers. Now, listen, here's my thing. Aaron Rodgers is a great quarterback, and I know everybody's turning off the show now, so it was nice having you aboard. But let's be realistic. Aaron Rodgers is fine. And it's ridiculous to put like the success of Aaron Rodgers on Luke Getsy. I mean, he was there and it's whatever. And Clay Harbor talked about this. Like, yeah, there's always like, okay, guy, like you were there. Like, it's the whole thing. It's the whole Adam Gase thing. Like, Adam Gase walked around for a long time being like, hey, I helped Peyton Manning and Jay Cutler to the best years of their career. And I'm like, okay, let me tell you. So here's what happened. You helped one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time, and you also helped Peyton Manning. Like, I get it. Like, okay, it doesn't impress me. What impresses me, though, about Luke Getsy, and this is one of the things that I always point to, is that last year, A.J. Dillon, Aaron Jones, both had over 1,100 scrimmage yards. Aaron Jones was a great receiver out of the backfield. I think he had at least 5 touchdown receptions. It might have been more. And I think when you look at that kind of usage, I think that Khalil Herbert and David Montgomery fit that mold perfectly. And if you go back to an Eagles example I was using earlier as well, like they're probably going to run the ball because they know that they have some deficiencies. Maybe they did get worse at wide receiver. Maybe they could improve on the offensive line. And by the way, you didn't have offensive line on your list. I thought for sure when I clicked into this hot click, this clickbait article. No, I'm just teasing. You did a very nice job. You did a nice job with it. I'm telling you. But you didn't have the offensive line on there. Why is that? Like, I think a lot of people just assume that the offensive, you're just like they're already bad and they're still bad, or what was your feeling there by leaving them off?
Yeah, I debated putting them in there, but I was kind of, again, looking at it from a roster standpoint. And you look at who they lost, and they lost like on the starting line. So you had James Daniels and Jermaine Ifedi, right? And Jason Peters. So then you kind of look at what they did. You had Tevin Jenkins, who really didn't get a lot of playing time, but you moved up to get him in the second round last year. Larry Borum, showed, he was impressive for the short amount of time that he was out there as well. And, obviously you go out and get Lucas Patrick, which I think I'm really high on him, at center, or if they end up moving him to guard, because who knows. And then obviously that leaves the right guard position. I feel confident about the other 4 positions, but that right guard position, which always comes back to haunt the Bears since Kyle Long, it seems, right? Yeah. So, I mean, right now it's been Dakota Dozier and Sam Mustipher kind of rotating during the offseason workouts. So, I mean, it sounds like one of them, is the plan there, but I still kind of feel that, I mean, I kind of felt the same about the offensive line. Like, I thought that Ryan Poles would go out and try to make a move. Well, he did try to make a move, right? And he tried, when he tried to get Ryan Bates from the Bills, who ended up signing that offer sheet. But at the same time, the offensive line, it didn't get better. It didn't get worse. So I really debated kind of going back and forth there. I mean, because James Daniels was the big loss. And I think that Lucas Patrick kind of coming in canceled it out. So, I mean, at the same time, I think that they're not, but I think that they're in a better position with Poles being in place and getting that new coaching staff in place as well. I think that gives them, I think the offensive line is going to be better than last year, but roster wise, I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of shifting.
All right. Ryan Bates, of course, one of the most beloved athletes in Chicago history, despite never playing a game. Everybody acted like we lost MJ during his title run. Like, it was Ryan, him not signing him being matched by the Bills was on par with Michael Jordan's retirement as far as Chicago lore goes. But as we draw to a close, though, I do want to ask you. So, okay, let's put it out there. I have been on the NFL Network. I predicted the Bears to win 10 games this season. How many you don't have to pick an exact number, but if you want to, that's cool as well. And I know I'm putting you on the spot. And it's June. There's a lot to still happen. Where do you see the Bears finishing this season?
Yeah, so I did this back when the schedule came out. I mean, they have a favorable schedule, which is good for them. I mean, if there's a year for this and for Ryan Poles not be making too many moves and kind of like building the roster and taking some time to do it, I think this is a good season. I see them. I mean, again, we're in June, right? I see them. I put them between 7 and 8 wins. But again, I think that could shift depending on how things work out. I want to really see a product on the field first, because it's different than if this was Matt Nagy's team coming back, because then the number would be probably lower. Kind of knowing how the offense already looks, right, and all the question marks out there. But I mean, I think that this is a favorable schedule. They could shock people. I mean. I'm not going to compare this team to 2018, but I'm just saying, like, no one had any expectations for that squad either, right? And you kind of you saw what they did with. I mean, he was a good coach that year, right? It worked for 1 year. So I mean, at this point, I put them about 7 or 8 wins. I could definitely see that number getting going up. There aren't too many opponents that are like those games the Bears are absolutely not going to win. I put the Packers up there just because until they beat them, I'm not going to ever pick the Bears to beat them. It's just not going to happen. And I think New England up there, Dallas, depending on, I think that there are some winnable games for the Bears, and they're playing some bad opponents. So, I mean, depending on if Matt Eberflus has his team ready to go, which I feel like he does, because already you're seeing like a culture change and, what he's demanding from his team, that intensity, which, got him in trouble a little bit, right? During the offseason. So, I mean, I think the coaching is going to be a big impact in this. So, and the schedule. So I'm going to stick. Maybe I go 8. I'm going to say they'll go 8 and 9 this year, with the potential to go up.
All right. Well, I'm going to hold you to 8 wins. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you stopping by, and we'll look forward again seeing you on the show once again, and of course seeing you on the Bears Wire. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Adam.
All right, there she goes, the great Alyssa Barbieri. And of course, thanks to everybody who downloaded and subscribed to this podcast. And you can go out there and do that. And of course, thanks to WCKG for allowing us to have this opportunity to entertain you on the drive time. We appreciate you. We'll see you next Friday. And again, like and subscribe to the podcast. If you enjoyed what you see, go search the archives. And until then, bear down. And Sammy, go ahead and play us out.
And that's a wrap. Hope you don't miss us too much until next time. Follow the Sick Podcast with Adam Rank on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Google Play, and Apple Podcasts.